We have an extra human in studio. This is fantastic. It's extra human beings in studio. Joining us from the worldwide leader in sports, one of the best analysts in the business, talking college and talking round ball. Good to see you, Jay Bilas. How are you?
I've been elevated to human.
You are human.
That's a good day for me. Elevated to human.
You're an actual human, and I do have to say, you have made a choice, and this is a choice that we all make whenever we play golf, which it does appear you will be doing as soon as you leave here today. You went lime green on the top.
I went lime green.
You went lime green on for a shirt. It's
the only one that was clean. I've been on vacation for a while.
Well, we also noticed on your Instagram that you've been playing a lot of golf as well, which is fantastic.
I haven't played in about 2 weeks though.
Oh my gosh!
So that's the longest period of the summer.
Well, you've been busy. We saw what you were doing last week, and let's jump into a little bit of that before we get to the name, image, likeness, whatever. Because I don't know if you're aware, you being in studio for hour number 2, I plan to solve all of the problems involving college athletics by the time you leave here.
It won't be hard.
Don't you think?
No, we can do it in one word. Deregulate.
Deregulate.
Yeah, it's over.
So how about that?
There you go.
Let's start right there. Deregulate. That's it. Simple. And because today is the last day on planet Earth in the United States of America in college athletics where name, image, and likeness laws will not be on the books, and kids will not be will be, if you will, not allowed to make money off of their name, image, and likeness, correct? Today's the last day.
Basically, yeah. So today's the last day that amateurism has at least a shadow meaning in our culture. Mm-hmm. Because the NCAA has said for over 100 years that college sports are pure amateur and that players cannot receive any remuneration for their athletic reputation or for play. Mm-hmm. And NIL has been part of that, sort of commercials. NIL means name, image, and likeness, as you mentioned. And that means, being in commercials, doing an ad, things like that, putting your name on a camp, teaching the sport that you participate in to young people, giving tennis lessons if you're a tennis player, right, and using your name associated with it. So that was deemed to be professional. So now the NCAA has given up on that. And now they're saying our players are professional. Now, we're still not going to pay them. Now they've made the distinction that the players cannot be employees of the university. So they've moved the goalposts, to use another sports metaphor. Right. But they've moved the goalposts there. But amateurism is dead, basically.
So tomorrow, how many states have these laws on the books? So like 6? I think I read it was like 6. At least that. Here in California, Florida, right? Mm-hmm. And once you include Florida, I mean, certainly in college athletics, certainly in college football, I mean, that's all she wrote. I mean, the dominoes are going to have to fall here.
Well, it's all she wrote. I mean, California started all this when Senator Nancy Skinner put legislation forward called the Fair Pay to Play Act. That's what started, and it shows you what competition looks like in America. As soon as other states saw that California was doing it, they're like, well, we have to keep up. And it shows what athletes are worth, that this is all being done because everybody's worried about access to players, that this is going to give a recruiting advantage to one state or another. So what the NCAA is doing now, because they got their tails handed to them in the Supreme Court over the Alston case, where they were again found to be a antitrust violator, a serial antitrust violator. Now the NCAA is afraid to have any restrictions on athletes with regard to name, image, and likeness at all. So they're saying right now, starting tomorrow, any school can do whatever your state allows, or you can fashion your own NIL policy if your state doesn't spell it out for you. And so they've basically punted on NIL.
Yeah, punted.
Well, they're totally unprepared. They didn't expect to lose at the Supreme Court level, but they've had their heads in the sand for a long time on this. This was coming, and they haven't passed anything. They haven't done anything. They wanted to wait. A lot of them wanted to wait until the outcome of the Supreme Court case, and I don't think they expected to get it handed to them
Jay
on
Bilas
that level.
Here on the Rich Eisen Show, especially with Brett Kavanaugh chiming in with his own 2 cents, essentially saying, hey, everybody who wants to bring more litigation to show off the antitrust violations that the NCAA appears to be perpetrating on a mass level, bring it, because it looks like they are antitrust violators on a mass level, and players could get paid, legitimately paid.
Yeah,
for
that's
their
where we're headed. So
work.
if you went back a little bit, not to bore you with sort of some of this legal stuff, but all this stems back to 1984 when there was a case called the Board of Regents case, the Oklahoma and Georgia Board of Regents. So that was the last time the NCAA was in front of the United States Supreme Court. But that was a case that was brought by schools against the NCAA saying, you can't tell us how many times we can be on television. The NCAA used to tell schools you can only be on television so often because they were worried it was going to affect, they'd oversaturate the TV market and it'd affect gate receipts. Like people stopped coming to the games. That the infinite wisdom of the NCAA, that television money was a pittance compared to ticket sales. So they sued under the same theory that the players just did, antitrust, and won. Now, in that case was some language that is referred to as dicta, like offhand comments by the court that had nothing to do with the ruling, that said that the thing that separates the NCAA from the pros is the players cannot be paid. And that's been used by courts all those years to really, for the NCAA to win their cases on the amateurism front. And so the courts gave great deference to the NCAA. They probably won 75% of their cases in court. The Alston case that just got decided took all that away. Like the court said, nope, this doesn't matter anymore. It was wrong at the time. It was used as dicta. It shouldn't have been. It was used essentially as law, and it shouldn't have been, and no longer. And from now on, NCAA, you are going to have to justify your business practices in every case and show that your policies are not anti-competitive and make a pro-competitive justification for it. And Kavanaugh said, in a concurring opinion, that the NCAA's the way the NCAA does business with regard to athletes would be illegal in any other industry. Like if they tried to do that to restaurant workers and said, all restaurant workers have to work for the love of the
love
business.
of the food.
Yeah, the love of food. That'd be illegal. Right. I mean, he went down a list of like medical workers. If they did it just for medicine, for the good of the public good, be illegal. If you did it in law, it'd be for love of the law, it'd be illegal. And the last line in there was the NCAA is not above the law. And if people think that courts around the country are not going to take that as this is what we have to do now, like the deference that the NCAA got is over, and not just on sort of academic benefits, which the Alston case was about, but name, image, and likeness and actual pay. I don't think the NCAA is going to be able to win these cases going forward.
So, Jay Bilas here on the Rich Eisen Show. Maybe a law can be written to save them, because I'm already reading that Mitch McConnell's come out and said maybe we need to pass a law to assist the NCAA. I'm kind of putting, I don't know if you use the word assist, but maybe we need a law here to address what's going on in the NCAA. Are they like lobbying Congress to basically say, come in here and let's write a law where we don't have to pay players and run that up the Supreme Court flagpole?
The Supreme Court wouldn't have anything to do with that. If Congress passes a law, that's going to carry the day. Okay. That's really what the court says. Like if Congress wants to step in and take care of this, they can.
Right.
And give the NCAA an antitrust exemption and allow them to continue to violate antitrust law.
That's where they would go. Right.
That's where they're going. So the NCAA will ask for an antitrust exemption. I cannot imagine that Congress, as divided as it is, would give a serial antitrust violator an antitrust exemption when they're making billions of dollars and say, okay, but you can keep restricting this one aspect of the business here, which clearly it's being proven now is very valuable to you and very valuable in the open market and the free market. So I would have a hard time imagining that's going to happen. But there is a thought process out there right now that without a national standard, people use the term wild, wild west, which I just call business. They also say bidding wars. There's going to be bidding wars for players. That's called business. The rest of the world, that's called business. If one entity offers you a contract and another entity says, no, we'll see that and raise it, and they go back and forth, or you're buying a house and you bid on it, that's called business. So we can handle this. It's not that big of a deal. The one thing, Rich, I'm hopeful of, and I believe will happen, is from July 1 forward, when we don't have federal legislation, people are going to find that the world will not spin off its axis. The games will go off on time. Everybody, their checks are going to clear. Everything's going to be okay. And doomsday isn't around the corner in college sports. It's not a big deal. Like just like we've had drastic change since 1984, since that last Supreme Court case, the Board of Regents case. We've had drastic change, but it's all been on the revenue side. So there's been incredible increases in revenue generated, and then in salaries paid, in facilities built, and nobody had a problem with it. Nobody said, put the brakes on this, stop this. We got to go to Congress to stop this. Nobody said that.
Well, I think people have no problem if institutions are paying for new buildings and for coaches. They don't have a problem with that. They would have a problem with a bidding war for an athlete's services because there will only be a handful of institutions who can afford that. Or, I'll put it won't be the battle for the hearts and minds of the student athlete to see if they can come to their program. It'll be who's got better Buddy Garrity's to pony up the cash for these people. And that's where I think people will say, hey, the world is spinning off its axis and there's really only 5 teams that can win a national championship because they've got the money for the athletes.
Which is already happening, because instead of the booster giving money to provide to a player via contract, they're giving it to the school to build these gigantic facilities or to get the coach fired or hired or all these different things. The facilities that are being built now are being built for one reason and one reason only, and that's for recruiting. So because we cannot offer anything to the players, what we're saying is, look at the fabulous environment we'll build for you, so you can come in here and you'll be able to sit in plush leather seats and while you watch film, and you'll eat this way or that way. And actually eating is a good example of sort of the world spinning off its axis theory that the NCAA's had. So you'll probably remember this. It might have been 5-6 years ago. The NCAA used to control what players ate, so you could have one meal a day provided by your university, and it got to the point where if Michigan would have a morning workout, they might want something for the players to eat there in the locker room. So they had a rule. It was the fruits, nuts, and bagels rule. So you could provide fruit, nuts, and bagels, but you couldn't have cream cheese on the bagel because that would make it a meal. So you could have grapes, but not grape jelly. You could have peanuts, but not peanut butter, stuff like that. So we used to make fun of that all the time, guys like me, about how ridiculous that is, that we're policing a spread on a bagel. And so I actually had this discussion with someone at the NCAA one time, and it was a wonderful woman who works there that said, so it's okay with you if a school feeds their players steak and lobster every meal. And I didn't know how to respond without being snarky, but I said, I don't think they're going to do that, but yeah, it is okay with me. I don't have a problem with that. And so now when people are saying that's an incredible advantage, that East Carolina cannot afford to provide its players the same thing as North Carolina. And you're going, I just don't want to live in a world where everyone has to be malnourished because East Carolina can't afford it. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And so now you go into these facilities, whether it's Alabama, Michigan, Duke, North Carolina, they have these wonderful eating facilities for the athletes. And they're competing on that level now. Look what we can feed you. We can fuel you properly, nutrition stations, all that's, it's great. Like, what's the harm? If a school wants to do that, great. And to your point on the economics, there are a lot of places can't afford to do that. Too bad. Like, if you can't afford to do it, maybe you shouldn't be in this business. And like, we don't have rules in the hamburger industry saying McDonald's can do more for their employees than the local mom and pop shop can. So everybody has to get paid less. The world doesn't work that way.
So then last question on this, we'll take a break, come back, and I'll try and delve into what name, image, and likeness will look like. And we're already getting a sense of that already. You were also at the NBA Combine in Chicago. I want to hit you on that and some of the other aspects. Jay Bilas here for the rest of the hour. But my last question for you here is, what would be, how much would a quarterback at the SEC make? How much would the quarterback at Alabama make? Is it possible that somebody would make more money being the quarterback at Alabama than being the star wideout for the Jacksonville Jaguars? Is it entirely possible that we see that one day?
It could be entirely possible. But to me, that's the free market. That's what the players are worth. And I don't have any problem with it. We don't ask, not that you're not asking, but we don't ask, like, what did Natalie Portman make while she was in college? Because she did movies. And there are a bunch of musicians out there that are on music scholarships, and they're not told what they can earn or accept while they're in school and have it affect their status. To me, the only thing the NCAA needs to do is, the only thing they need to police on the eligibility front is the athlete a full-time student enrolled in good standing? That's it. The rest of it is up to the individual school. Now, if an individual school doesn't want to pay an athlete, then don't. If they don't want to allow their athletes to take advantage of NIL, then tell them, if you're here, we don't allow that. That's fine. Just like BYU doesn't allow their students to drink caffeine. Like, go ahead. But there'll be other entities in the marketplace that will allow them to do that, and maybe more athletes will start going to these other places.
What about the idea that another school can come in after 1 year at Alabama and say, I'll pay you more for your sophomore year? What do you think? Is that something that, like, free agency, or
well,
is it,
we already have free
letter,
agency.
A letter? I know there's a transfer portal, if you will, and there's time or what have you. But that's based off of, well, you just lost your playing time there. You need playing time. You can come here, or who knows. But what if it's a money thing? Like, you said no to us your freshman year, but hey, we saw what you did sophomore year. You can hit it more than what you're going to be paid in your second year of your letter of intent. You know what I'm saying?
Open question. But it'll probably be via contract. So the schools right now, the way NIL is supposed to work, the schools aren't going to be able to participate in providing the players deals. Right. But ultimately, that's what's going to happen.
Damn.
Because there's too much money out there for the schools. So the university, in the future, the university mark and the player are going to be used together because those revenue streams are just too valuable. And the universities will see that, and they'll go that direction. But right now, that would be prohibited. But if you were to say, hey, hey, Rich Eisen, quarterback at Michigan, hey, the quarterback at Ohio State right now is making twice what you're making. If you transfer to Ohio State, pretty sure you're going to get that too. That could be a powerful draw. But right now we're not restricting athletes, or we're not restricting any other spending control or business issue in college sports. It's just the athlete. I don't have a problem with it, and that's why I think pay the players, because if you sign them to a contract, they're not going to be going anywhere. That's where ultimately I think this should go. And people say, well, what are we going to pay them? How do we know? All these universities have 30,000 employees. They don't stay up at night going, do we pay the landscape professional the same as the head coach? Like, what do we do? I don't know how to do this. But there's so much turnover in athletics. Like, there's no turnover with their employees. There's all kind of turnover. They have 300 athletes. They can figure it out. It's not that big of a deal.
Let's get into what name, image, and likeness can look like. Graham Mertz, the quarterback of the Wisconsin Badgers. Did you see what he did?
No.
Okay. He has come up with a logo. There it is on the screen. That's his logo. And he trademarked it. And I imagine he'll put it on apparel or what have you. It looks very Tiger Woods-like, to be honest with you.
That's cool.
But that's it. That's the G and the M, and he is ready to come out of the NIL box tomorrow.
And they should, and the players should. I mean, do I think that all these players are going to be able to sell their own apparel lines? No, but they should be able to participate in commerce just like everyone else. And it's amazing how a lot of people are freaking out over this. That, oh my, like the floodgates are opening to the the gates of hell here. And I had somebody text me this morning about it, saying, now, so you're telling me if a player starts a company, an LLC, to sell T-shirts, that boosters could buy an equity stake in that company? And I'm going, yeah, if they wanted to, unless the school or the conference prohibits it. Yeah, they could. Do you really think that's the apocalypse being upon us? I don't think it's that big of a deal.
What if it's in a state where again, this is where we're relying on your law degree, where I think, and I'm definitely going screw this up. I think you once attempted to put Barney behind bars, if I'm not mistaken. Right?
That would have been a good result, I think, for everyone.
Right. So, but what happens if a state like California, Florida says, go ahead and make your money off your name, image, and likeness, and then a school says, no, you cannot have a booster put that money in your LLC that is legal under the NIL. That's something we won't allow you to do. Will this wind up in like a state Supreme Court and then wind up in front of the U.S. Supreme Court at some point? It
could. I mean, if the state allows it, then I can't imagine the university trying to prohibit it. But that's sort of what I believe this should be in the grand scheme of things, is that individual entities, individual schools should be able to make their own decisions on how they want to handle their programs and their employees and their workers. And the Supreme Court made it pretty clear that athletes are workers. They consider athletes to be workers. But if a school doesn't want to pay a player, then don't pay a player. If you don't even have to give a player a scholarship. So while we're, not to totally avoid your question, but while we're worried about sort of fairness across the board, is this going to be fair to this player versus that player? What about the offensive lineman when the quarterback's going to be the most valuable? We don't ask that question with regard to playing time. The coaches don't say, well, we need to play everybody the same amount of minutes. It's only fair. They're all working just as hard. And our SID needs to be mindful that we can't have the media just going to the quarterback after the game. They've got to ask questions of everybody.
Exactly.
We've got to make everybody available.
I have no problem with this NIL stuff at all, Jay. It can be totally incumbent upon the quarterback to tell. I always use the name Buddy Garrity because it's a pop culture phrase that people understand as a booster, and a guy who's like owns a car place and in whatever town. You could easily tell Buddy Garrity, you want to hire me to pitch your cars? You got to get my lineman too.
Yeah.
You got to pay my lineman. It's like, most favored nations. You pay me to get me. You got to get my lineman taken care of too. Period. End of story. And I have no problem with that. I have no problem with this player, going ahead and saying, I'm worth this much. I'm the star player here. Any of the women that we just saw crush it on the worldwide leader in sports playing softball, where the country was locked in on that. Why shouldn't they get their money because they just hit a great home run or had a terrific play? I have no problem with that.
But the funny part about this discussion with me, Rich, is so we're talking about how much an athlete might be worth, and we're using the abstract because they haven't been allowed anything. So we always start at zero. That most of them aren't even worth the scholarship. Well, yeah, actually, that's the least amount they're worth because that's what they're allowed. That's the only thing they're allowed. But if you start looking at the employees of the athletic department, the paid employees right now, whether they're assistant coaches or director of basketball operations or the analytics guys or whatever, you name the employee. So they're worth $600,000 plus benefits? Really? But not the athletes. Like the offensive lineman's worth barely a scholarship, according to some people. But the director of operations is worth $250,000, or the strength coach is worth $1 million. Like, come on, man. The players are worth a ton. And the fact that we're worried, so deathly afraid that there are going to be these quote unquote bidding wars shows you how valuable they are. And they ought to be able to realize upon that value. And if we have reasonable business restrictions to deal with, I'm cool with that. Let's talk about it. But the players start at zero. Like I look at it almost like a faucet. So for the rest of the world, the business faucet is turned on completely. With an athlete, college athlete, we're talking about, well, how many drips are we going to allow the athlete? Let's start with zero, and then we'll start talking about how many drips, and maybe we open it a little bit. And to me, that's not the way it goes. Let's deregulate this completely, and amateurism's dead. Allow the athletes, their only worry should be, is this legal? Am I paying my taxes? Am I are you doing all the things? Because we don't worry about this stuff when we snarkily told them when they were quote unquote amateurs, when we told them, hey, you want money? Go get a freaking job. Nobody worried about their tax consequences when we told them that.
Right.
Or whether they could show up on time for work, or whether their job would affect their football or their basketball or all that stuff.
Or academics.
Or their academics. Nobody cared about that. We say, you want money? Get a damn job like the rest of us. Well, Now they have a job like the rest of us, and they're being treated like the rest of us, at least on the NIL front.
Last question for you on this, Jay. You've been asked this before. I might have asked you. Like, would you be interested in running the NCAA? Like, if Emmert was out, if somebody's just like said, hey, this last go round with the NCAA, we're getting our ass kicked in front of Congress. Let's go in a totally different direction. That this is now obvious where things are going. They see you on TV. You've got an outstanding background in the law as well as knowing the business and college athletics. Would you be interested in something?
I have always said that I will do whatever I can to help. So if I felt like it was helpful and there would be some authority behind it to where you could actually do what you felt was appropriate, then of course I would. That will never happen.
Why?
Because my views, even though a lot of this stuff I feel like I've been proven right of late.
Well, I mean, the canary in the coal mine is dead.
Yeah, well,
Jay. And buried.
Mark Emmert and Don Remy, his second hand, who's now going into the Biden administration, they stomped that canary to death. The truth is, Rich, this didn't have to happen. The Supreme Court decided the Alston case because the NCAA appealed it to the Supreme Court. And they did so after having a favorable ruling in the Ninth Circuit. Like, the Ninth Circuit kept amateurism alive and didn't touch the good stuff out of the Board of Regents case.
Yeah, they spiked their own football on themselves.
It's like they couldn't handle somebody telling them, okay, you can't do this one little part. You can do the rest.
Right.
You can't do this one little part. And they freaked out.
I know, which is why if I'm a school president or I'm a school anybody, I would say, what the hell are we doing? Like, get this guy out. Let's get somebody in. We see which way the wind is blowing. Like I said, the canary in the coal mine dropped dead a very long time ago. That's why, I mean, you don't
I would if I'd help. I don't think they would ever do that because it would be capitulating, and sort of giving up on all the things they've argued for all these years. Like that, it's got to be difficult. Like I have so many friends within the structure,
right?
ADs, presidents, even people in Indianapolis that work in the NCAA office. Most of them the overwhelming majority are great people. They've been hamstrung by bad policy. But I do feel for them that they've ridden this horse for so long, and now the horse is dead. They rode it into the ground, and their whole way of thinking is going to have to change. Now, I think it's going to be easy for it to change because they're going to see that it's not that big of a deal. There's a lot of money to be made, not just for the athletes. The universities are going to make a lot of money off of NIL if they allow the athletes to use university marks in tandem. Like if they can work together, athlete image and likeness along with the university mark, just like we do in the NFL, the NBA, all that stuff. There's a ton of money to be made and a ton of revenue for the universities. But they look at it, right now they look at it as a zero-sum game, that every dollar an athlete makes is a dollar that's taken out of the university account. That if a car dealer, to your example, if a car dealer is given a contract to a player, well, normally they would have given that money to the school. And so the school's looking at that. We're losing money by athletes making money. I don't see it that way, and I think they're going to find out it's not going to work that way in the long run.
Jay Bilas here in studio on the Rich Eisen Show. What goes on at an NBA combine? What does it? I missed it. I'll be very honest with you. I know what it goes on at an NFL combine. Or is there just a lot of chit chat, horse trading, a lot of rumors?
There's some similarities to it,
right?
They do the anthro stuff, so they all do the vertical leap and they do the shuttles, they run and all that stuff, the 3/4 court sprint. So they get all their time and they get measured with their wingspans, which makes me very happy. And then they play. So the top prospects, after getting measured and they do interviews just like the NFL combine. But then they play 5-on-5.
Okay, so we actually see what they do.
Yeah, but the best players don't play, or the expected top draft picks don't play.
Like the quarterbacks don't throw at the combine.
Yeah, that's been that way forever. And why would you give them an extra peek when you don't have to? Then we go to this thing where we're at the level now and have been for a while. Guy plays well on day one, doesn't play on day two. His agent tells him to shut it down. And that's fine. I mean, you don't have to play, but because the players right now, before they're drafted, they're not members of the NBA Players Association. They're not required to do anything the NBA says.
Yeah, right.
And so, maybe in the future that's something they'll look at because the NBA Combine now, the NBA Draft Combine has become it's a public event now. The TV covers it. And,
oh yeah.
I played in the so in 1986, I went to it was called the NBA pre-draft camp.
Yes.
In Chicago, at Moody Bible Institute, I think. Dennis Rodman played in it, Scott Skiles, all that stuff, and I was one of the idiots that played in it. Yeah, and look at some of those names. There were some pretty good players that played in my
that's
name.
Very I mean, that's a hunky guy in the photograph. I'm not going to lie.
Really attractive.
I would agree.
Look at the hair.
Nate McMillan was on your team.
Nate McMillan was on my team, and. But it was an awesome experience. But there was no coverage of that. They let the media in. Like this was a pretty funny one. So they let the media in to do interviews. So we're all kind of lined up against the bleachers that have been pushed in at this place. And I'm being interviewed by some local media from maybe North Carolina or the Southeast or something. And Scott Skiles is standing right next to me, getting interviewed by all the media from Michigan. And
he's Michigan State.
Michigan State. Oh, sure. Great player at Michigan State. Played in the NBA for a long time. Coached for a long time in the NBA. So they ask him, "Is this the hardest thing you've ever done?" And he said, "I just got out of jail." He goes, "This is Club Med." It was like, damn, I'm in the wrong place. I don't know if I can handle this.
Well, in the NFL, that would be a red flag. I'll be honest with you. Having been to a combine here and there. So who's number one? Who do you think goes to the Pistons? What do you think?
Cade Cunningham from Oklahoma State will be number one.
There you go.
He's the most complete player. 6'8", handles it, point guard, shoots it. He does everything. Plays it both ends of the floor. He's not a freak athlete, but he's very athletic. He'll do just fine. But this is probably the deepest draft that. Top to bottom, like 1 through 60, the deepest draft that I've covered.
That's good.
It's been my first draft for ESPN was 2003, the LeBron, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, Carmelo draft, Darko draft too.
The Darko
draft.
Darko
so this is the deepest one.
Oh my gosh! And the main scuttlebutt at the people maybe chit-chatting was what if Ben Simmons is a viable Philadelphia 76er anymore, because that happened just as the combine was hitting. Woj had a story about, Rich Paul of Clutch Sports meeting with Philly brass and things of that nature. Where do you stand on that subject matter?
I mean,
Jay?
The more they talk about it right now, the harder it is to trade Ben Simmons for value. Mm-hmm. That's the hardest sort of thing that I've seen evaluating a player is normally when a player struggles to shoot the ball in college, we say, and it's accurate, that's going to improve. That's one area where the player can really improve. And, I don't know anybody that said, well, he's going to be afraid to pull the trigger in 5 years. Nobody said that.
It's incredible.
And it's incredible. It's like watching David Duval when he had the yips or couldn't draw the club back and all that stuff. I can't figure it out. Because there have been a lot of players that shot it poorly in college that went on to be decent shooters and guys you had to go out and guard. Ben Simmons does it, and he works hard. Like he's an excellent defender. It's not like he's taking it easy, only wants to play on offense, that kind of stuff. But it's clearly a mental problem, a mental issue for him, and one that he needs to get over because he's an all-star without being able to shoot it. If he could shoot it a little bit, he'd be up there in the very top echelon.
Yeah, I mean, regressing is definitely the word. So in the NFL, we always say it takes 5 years to see whether somebody is, NFL worthy or not. See if a draft can pan out team wise. Obviously, other individual players like Patrick Mahomes, you can kind of get the drift. Mm-hmm. What about the NBA? I mean, is it possible that we're still can evaluate Ben Simmons at this point in time of his career?
Yeah, I mean, he can still continue to get better. I mean, I was joking with a couple of friends of mine that, right now we're talking about some different players that one of them was Chris Duarte from Oregon, and is saying, well, he's 23 years old, like he's ancient and he'll be retiring after his rookie year or something. When that was the age of a lot of guys when they came into the league 15 years ago. That everybody was a senior, and you talked about them being a rookie that had a lot to learn. Mm-hmm. Now it seems like these younger guys have an advantage because they haven't established who they are yet, and they've got a lot of room for growth. So sometimes you're hearing about a guy, he's only 18. Well, okay, but how good is he? And do you really think he can get that much better? But some of these players, I would love to see if the NFL took the restrictions off of when they can declare and go into the draft, I think the NFL would be just like the NBA. They'd be drafting sophomores, and they would have drafted Trevor Lawrence after his freshman year.
Right. That is, and I've talked to a lot of evaluators about this, and people would say this is just covering for, using college as a free minor league system for them. But the difference between the NBA and the NFL is some of these kids will get their heads torn off. Like some grown-ass man, 30-year-old, 32-year-old coming for a 19-year-old or 20-year-old, it would be particularly physically devastating.
It could be.
For those kids. There are some outliers, like you would say Trevor Lawrence or Leonard Fournette, that one year where he had to go back to LSU, after having that
Herschel
spectacular
would have been
year.
okay.
Yeah, there are some that would definitely have been okay,
Yeah.
but on the whole, most of them would get their asses handed to them.
One of the reasons we're able to say that is because we don't know. We don't have any data on
That's
it
right.
because they're not allowed. And, I think it would be very much the same. I think you'd have a number of players that would be able to go in and compete and make rosters and all that stuff. But just on the talent side, they would want them as early as they could get them, because they wouldn't want to wait and risk not being able to take Trevor Lawrence when he was a freshman or something like that.
Right.
And the reason that happened, college football is 50 years older than the NFL.
Right.
And was established. And the NCAA put a rule in, I don't even know how many years ago it was, 75, 80 years, a rule where if you worked in any capacity in the professional leagues, you were ineligible to work in college. So if you coached in the NFL, whatever, you couldn't come back and ever work in college. And the NFL actually went to the NCAA on bended knee and said, please don't do this. You'll kill us before we get off the ground.
Right.
And they guaranteed them, we will not touch your players until they graduate. We won't draft them until they graduate.
That was the way that works.
You know when that changed? The NFL didn't start drafting juniors because they thought, well, players have advanced now. Now they're ready and they won't get their ass handed to them.
Right.
They did it because the USFL started drafting juniors.
That makes sense.
1984.
And now we have Nick Saban.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
All right. I saw you even Instagram this out because I follow you on Instagram as well. You Instagrammed out your appearance on The White Shadow back in the day. How did you wind up on The White Shadow back in the day?
One of my high school teammates, Matt Baker, his dad, Dick Baker, was the head coach at Loyola Marymount at one point and has been an NBA scout for a million years. So back in that time, during the 70s, he was in Hollywood as he did a lot of work as an extra. Every movie back in the 70s that had basketball in it,
yes,
Dick Baker was like the official, the referee. And
like one-on-one, like Robbie Benson, all of that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's one-on-one.
Okay, fish that ate the fish that saved
just
Pittsburgh.
about. I mean, you name it. I mean, he's in the $6 Million Man, all these different things. So he was a technical consultant for the White Shadow.
Okay.
So in 1978, 79 probably, he got our team on the show as the opposing team of Carver High. And the plot of the particular show was one of the Carver players was transferring to essentially this all-white high school. And he was leaving Carver and transferred to our school. And so we were the players on the opposing team. We were all 16, 17 years old and had no idea that all of the actors that played the Carver High players were in their 30s. So we were talking to these guys. The director would yell, cut, and then we'd start talking to them, like they went to a crosstown high school. We're like, hey, my mom's picking me up after this. How are you getting home? And those guys lighting up a cigarette going, get away from me, kid. Like, what the hell's wrong with you?
Did you meet Ken Howard that day?
Did
you meet him?
Yeah, I met him and Salami and all those guys, Coolidge. They were great. Aside from Coolidge, though, none of them could play dead. Like they were they were actors, so none of them could play. And so they used to do these dolly shots where the gym they played in was on a soundstage, so there was it was made up. I mean, it's tiny.
Yeah.
And in order to dunk, they would have to jump. Except for Coolidge, they would have to jump off a ramp. Lot of cuts to a shot going through the basket that they didn't necessarily make. It was pretty funny. A lot, in a way, as a 17-year-old kid, very disappointing.
Look at that, number 3 in your program, number 1 in your heart. Look at the Oak Ridge forward right there. Now, you were being berated because you were laughing during the coach tearing your team a new one, correct?
That was the opening of the show. So we're coming into the locker room. We'd just been beaten, I think, and the coach is supposed to yell at me.
Yes.
And so they had inserted our high school into it. So essentially, our high school name had just beaten Oak Ridge. And so he's yelling at another player, and I started laughing, and then he turned it on me. And so it wound up being like it was foreshadowing for playing for Coach K. Because that was basically every post-game speech for the remainder of my career.
So you never laughed at a Coach K during the middle of a Coach K
Not
screen,
during it.
right?
I waited till he left the room, and then we started laughing.
Jay Williams told about a time where Coach K's hip went out during a speech or something like that, and he was down on the floor.
He's had a few of those where
said that.
Like one time when I was a grad assistant, he wanted to show the team that they weren't going after loose balls like they needed to. So he threw a ball in front of the team in the locker room and then dove on it and wriggled around and growled, and this is what you do. And then when he went back into the coach's locker room, he dropped down on his knees and he's like, he had hurt himself. And because he was 50 some years old. If I did that now, I'd be injured.
You'd say the same thing. Right?
And so a couple times it'd get away from the thing I laughed at most with Coach K, and he's the best coach and the best guy.
Of course.
Sure. But he had a thing once when I was a player where he gave us the what for about we need to have attention to detail. Like no detail is too small. And we have to be able to tell each other tough things. We have to be tough enough where we hold each other accountable. And if somebody makes a mistake, we correct it. And the guy doesn't get upset about it. He takes the correction and all. Accountability and attention to detail. So then he goes and then he says, and now specifically these three things we have to clean up. And number one on the list was rebound, and he spelled it REBOUB. So Billy King, who later on was the president of the 76ers and the Nets, leaned over to me and says, "Do you think he wants us to point that out? Like attention to detail, like he's testing us."
Oh, right.
I go, "Yeah, you do it." So we didn't say anything.
Right.
The rest of practice, every time a shot went up, we'd go, "Rebound!" And he caught on. He goes, "Oh, yeah, that's real funny." Very good. Real funny. He didn't care for that one. Rebound. Duke is not a good rebounding team. That might come out this year in his final year.
It, yes.
Duke is not a good rebounding team.
If they could only rebound better. But I love that Billy thought like that might be like a four-dimensional chess way of Coach K trying to see if you're paying attention.
We were afraid of disappointing him. That not only that we would get the Carver High treatment or the Oak Ridge coach treatment, but that we didn't want to disappoint him, and so if he asked us to do something, we wanted to do it. But we were thinking that way. That is this a test? This is okay. What do we do here? Do we need to do this?
Jay Bilas, everybody, follow him on Twitter and Instagram at Jay Bilas on Twitter and at Real Deal.
It changed to at Jay Bilas on. I was able to get the Real Deal up there.
Very good.
Because so many people grabbed that name. Can you imagine all the people who wanted that?
And it is your name, image, and likeness. We're back here on Peacock in a second. Hour 3 coming up. We're still here on TV. That's the way things work around here. So before there was NIL, there was FNB, fruits, nuts, and bagels.
Yeah.
So there was FNB before NIL.
Yeah.
Come a long way from FNB, man.
Come a long way. That you couldn't have a spread on your bagel. Otherwise, it was a meal and counted against
which school was serving bagels? Like
all of them.
All of them?
Yeah, that's all you could give to the players, like before a morning workout or something like that.
Bagels?
And, yeah, the player.
That's like
it was so stupid because you'd have to call
bagels, a schmear.
We would call compliance and say, "Can we give the players cereal?" Nope, can't do it.
Come on.
That was the way it worked. And some schools used to, like I used to hear from coaches about this stuff all the time. Some schools would say, we have 3 people call the NCAA separately, and we get 3 different interpretations, and we just pick the one we like best. And that's how screwed up things were. This was my favorite. This was years ago at a school. I can't tell you the name, but
okay.
Schools got parking rules. So seniors get the best parking,
of course,
followed by juniors and the like. So junior basketball player is rooming with senior manager. Junior basketball player has a car, senior manager doesn't. senior manager, who's his roommate, says, how about this? I'll get a parking pass and you can use it. You just pay for it at the end of the year. Mm-hmm. Good. They do that. The junior basketball player goes to the bursar's office to pay for the parking pass, but it's on the senior manager's name. So somebody in the bursar's office says, well, why are you doing that? That's kind of weird. So they just called somebody in compliance. Compliance says, well, we better check with the NCAA. They suspended the player for, I don't know how many games, 7 games, because they deemed the senior manager a member of the basketball staff. So that was an impermissible benefit. And you're going, wait a minute. He's living with a member of the basketball staff.
Yeah.
Like that's so stupid. I couldn't believe it. But that kind of thing has been going on for 100+ years now, maybe with NIL and the fact that the players, maybe we'll we'll begin to stop all of this ridiculousness. And there's a tennis player from UMass named Brittany Collins, who found out, she's a professional tennis player, found out recently that her team, all of their records were vacated because they received a $250 credit for a phone jack on a rotary phone in their dorm.
Oh my gosh.
And that's the kind of thing that goes on. Impermissible benefit.
Jay Bilas here on the Rich Eisen Show. Thanks for coming on, brother.
Thanks for having me. Honored to be here.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.